you won't hear the rest of it. Hello, hello, hello. So it's not up yet, but we welcome everybody in. Let's see if it starts soon. Let's see who we got coming in here. Tired. Just me. Just me. Just me. I think this judge realized that. He let Lori take all of his lunch. Bev does do that. But I do like that he doesn't like. She comes at this judge really hard, and he doesn't really stop her, and that is frustrating. I like that I like it when people stop him, like in Sarah Boone's when the judge there was like, nope, not doing this. So. And then but as soon as it comes on, guys, I'm just gonna hang here. I'll be in the background, and then as soon as it comes on, we'll start watching. I'm excited.
I mean, I kind of have my own kind of theories about that.
I think right now the state is methodically showing that they didn't try to help the victim in this case, and that will tie into the fact that this was not self-defense. If it was truly self-defense, they would have protected themselves and been like, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" And tried CPR or called 911 right away. I think that's probably the state's theory, and I think she is trying to say, just bring doubt into that, like, hey, maybe we did act fast enough. They're saying that it was 45 minutes, but you can't really tell that from uh the physical symptoms on the body when you were there. How do you know we didn't try? They can't say that. And I think that's the focus, because the state is trying to discount that self-defense claim.
Hmm. I want to circle back to the juror issue. Dustwitch is asking, can you explain again why we lost two jurors? So when the first juror was dismissed yesterday, the judge had said something to the effect of the jury fund is not for alimony or child support. Judge said he would hate to lose a juror on day one, but feels the juror should be excused, and the state agrees. So, Kurt, that to me sounds like something maybe like this was going to be a hardship financially on that juror who was dismissed on day one.
I think that's right. I think what I heard yesterday too, if we're talking about the same juror, was that this juror was willing to serve, but had an issue. His employer had an issue with him serving for 5 weeks or whatever that may be, and brought that to the attention of the judge, and probably went, "Judge, I can't lose my job, right? And
Mm-hmm.
my employer can only give me so much time." I think that was probably the case. So um, the judge thought that was best, and I'm not sure what happened today.
Yeah, and we don't know because it was discussed at a sidebar. So the juror that was dismissed today, the second juror, we don't know. That all went down at a sidebar, and then there was the other juror who possibly could have been dismissed but wasn't, who had remembered seeing some of the body camera footage. Let's go to now Freya. Freya asks, if Kay, Larry, or Colby have to testify, would Lori be able to cross-examine any of them, considering they are victims of her crimes? Well, she's representing herself, so I guess the answer would be yes.
The answer is 100% yes. She would be able to cross-examine them. And that, going back, way back to one of your questions, Anjanette, that's another reason defendants sometimes want to represent themselves. They just want to make it as uncomfortable as possible for these witnesses that are going to testify against them, knowing that they're going to have to speak face to face. Lots of times defendants are delusional, thinking that because of that, these people won't show up. But it is a very tense and awkward situation, and she's going to get to cross-examine them.
Dennis BSO asks, why is there even a trial if she got life in Idaho?
I mean, that's a good question. A lot of people are like, why are we paying this money to do this? Why would Arizona do that? One, Arizona has its own interests, and the crime took place here, and every victim is entitled to that justice, right? The other thing, more technical, but I think is interesting, is that Idaho case is going to be on appeal. If something were to happen in that Idaho case on appeal, maybe it gets overturned, and she's convicted and in custody here, she's not going anywhere. So in a way, it kind of preserves that Idaho conviction while it's on appeal.
Mm. That brings up an interesting question. This will be kind of my last one. If she's convicted here in Arizona, do you think they keep her here in Arizona, or does she go back to Idaho? Because this happened first. This was the first homicide.
Well, hard to say, and that might be an agreement between the states, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
departments of corrections run and money wise, but she was convicted, even though this happened first. She was convicted first in Idaho, and the state of Arizona had to do what's called a writ. They had to writ her out of that custody for this trial. So typically she'd go back to Idaho, but that could also be subject to just negotiations and agreement, and where it's better.
Okay, and I kind of fibbed. We'll do one last question. This is
Okay.
from Mad Mac. Is she to rep herself in the second trial, and can that change if she decides she wants an attorney? So that would be the trial for the conspiracy to try to murder Brandon Boudreaux. So could she decide, you know what, this was too much and too hard. I'll take an attorney for this one.
100% she could do that. She, of course, I think to answer the first part of that question, she could represent herself again, but maybe she'll learn her lesson and say, geez, and maybe I should have a lawyer. But she could make that decision. It's totally separate from what's going on in this case.
All right. Well, Kurt Altman, it's been great hanging out with you, and it's been great hanging out with all of the viewers, of course. We are going to wrap up our little lunch Q&A here. Obviously, it's lunchtime out where you are. So I hope
Right,
you go
right.
out and get a snack. Everybody, we are on that 30-minute delay. So, court will be a little bit delayed coming back for the trial. But it did start just in the last couple of minutes. So stay with us. As I told you, we'll be doing this all week long. So tune in every day during the lunch break, and we will be here with you taking your questions. And so get ready. The trial is going to resume. And so go get your snacks, get your water, your food, whatever you need, and come right back here to the YouTube live stream. Again, Kurt Altman, thank you so much. It's been great being with you. And thank you. Stay tuned. I'm Anjanette Levy, and you've been watching our Lunch Show Q&A right here on Law and Crime.
counsel as well as a defendant. Now, you may recall 2 years ago in Idaho, she was convicted of killing her 2 youngest children over her doomsday religious beliefs. And now she faces another jury charge with plotting to murder her 4th husband. Andres Gutierrez is covering the trial in Phoenix. Andres, good morning to you.
Good morning, Gail. And although right now Lori Vallow Daybell is already serving 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole, those cases in Idaho cannot be considered here. And they still, though, loom large. Vallow Daybell has pleaded not guilty and is not an attorney, but has chosen to represent herself because she says she knows this case better than anyone else.
Self-defense is not a crime. A family tragedy is not a crime.
Appearing without her orange jumpsuit and shackles, Lori Vallow Daybell was back in court in Phoenix on Monday. She's representing herself against charges she conspired with her late brother, Alex Cox, to kill her 4th husband, Charles Vallow, in 2019.
The evidence will show that at some point while I was running away from Charles, who was chasing me with a bat, that Alex apparently retrieved his gun.
Visibly emotional during her brief opening statement, Vallow Daybell said the evidence will show the shooting was in self-defense.
Lori Vallow is why Alex was able to shoot Charles. Lori Vallow is why Charles is dead.
The prosecution argued Vallow Daybell conspired with Cox to kill Charles Vallow, who had filed for divorce from her in order to cash in on a $1 million life insurance policy, all so she could marry her new boyfriend, Chad Daybell.
And Lori Vallow wanted to keep the same lifestyle that she had with Charles. And she could get all of this if Charles was dead.
What is your definition of nonchalant?
During cross-examination, Vallow Daybell grew combative with witnesses.
So if I would have been hysterical, that would have been more out of character than if I was calm when everybody else was being calm. Isn't that correct?
Speculation.
CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson.
She has essentially made a lot of the defense here based on her credibility, based on her telling of the story. And so if the jury really doesn't like her, that's not good for her, but it shouldn't be the reason they convict.
All right. Now, if this trial is expected to last 6 weeks, if convicted, Vallow Daybell faces a maximum sentence of life in prison. Once this trial ends, she'll go to trial yet again in June for conspiracy and the attempted murder
Judge, we do need to raise one issue. I was advised that juror, I believe 15, was looking at his cell phone during the testimony of the previous witness. I don't know if it was coincidence, but right after that, he put a question into the question box. We did have a very detailed medical questions for Captain Keller.
Is that the gentleman with the white hair and the glasses?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to see if we could ensure that there isn't any additional
All right.
investigation going on.
Let's bring juror 15 in.
Testifying as an expert or non-expert?
Are you calling him next?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. I last week on Monday asked you if you were objecting to him as an expert as much as late disclosure, and your at that time was that it was late disclosure, that the case had been pending for 4 or 5 years, and that you felt that his disclosure a month approximately before trial was late. I then said I would go back and look at the state's 15.1 supplemental disclosure statement about his testimony. And it appears from the avowal made in that statement that he has relevant information that could assist the jury in making a determination. Do you want to be heard on that?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I feel like it was the state just putting him on as an expert so that he can give his opinion. I wasn't objecting to him as a detective and someone who's been there on the case, or as the scene agent, but he went from scene agent to expert so that he can give his opinion. And I don't think it is relevant that he can give his opinion at this time. We weren't allowed to have enough time to get someone to rebut his professional opinion.
Based on his training and experience, he was going to make an opinion about one of the gunshots being fired, possibly from the victim laying in a prone position.
As a firearms expert, and we haven't had a CV on how he's a firearms expert.
There was information on his training and experience contained within that 15.1 statement. I think additionally, questions about whether or not the extent of his training, the extent of his experience would probably go more toward the weight that the jury should give it rather than the credibility. I should say, rather than the admissibility of it. You're free to cross-examine him on his training experience or lack thereof. But at this time, I was inclined to allow him to testify I'm hesitant to use the term as a full expert, but he has training and experience that could assist the jury in making a determination one way or the other based on that. So,
And he can't do that just as the scene expert or as the detective that was there?
well, I think he could, based on his training and experience, do that. I'm hesitant to call him an expert per se in the sense of a scientific type expert with scientific type testing, which requires more foundational evidence on someone's expertise. This type of testimony, I think, is testimony that a lot of people that have experience with guns could have an opinion on. Again, you can cross-examine him on his knowledge, his training, his experience, etc.
But will it be given to the jury that he's an expert in firearms? Yes or no?
I don't know. I guess I'll have to see how the testimony, what kind of foundation is laid for that by the state. All right. Anything the state want to supplement your argument or your 15.1 motion?
Your Honor, no. The defense was able to interview Dan Coons on March 21st of 2025. So after that was noticed, so they were given the opportunity to question him regarding any of his expertise or not. And really the state filed in an abundance of caution. I think that a normal scene agent with sufficient information and knowledge and training might be able to discuss trajectory, but we wanted to make it clear that he did have that sufficient background, training, and expertise to do that.
Are you planning on eliciting testimony that an opinion as to which shot was first as opposed to which shot was second?
Only in that he did attend the autopsy, so he does also understand both that information, the shored wound, which goes into play in his determination of the trajectory, as well as that the other shot went through the victim's heart. So I think he can say that what he believes the trajectory for each shot is. I guess if someone wants to argue that he was shot in the heart first, or laying on the ground first and then got up and was shot a second time through the heart, that I don't think that he has that expertise to say that perhaps someone couldn't do that.
Well, I think the point I'm getting at is no one observed it that is going to testify to the shooting as far as I know so far. And that I don't even think your medical expert could definitively say this was shot 1 and this was shot 2. So that's fair cross-examination. But other than that, I'm going to allow his testimony. If you have a foundational objection or any other sort of hearsay objection or evidentiary objection, you can make it depending on what the question is.
Okay. I mean, I don't really understand how the trajectory is relevant to conspiracy, so I would like to make that objection. We're stipulating that there was 2 shots.
Okay.
Your Honor, just for the record, it's because the defense has noticed self-defense.
Right. All right. Let's bring the jury in. Yeah, why don't you do that? Hey, I was meant to ask Trey how to move that. Hey, will you move this podium back? Because we're not going to need it until closing argument. Move this back over there before we bring it.
Thank you. Let me go get it.
All right, sir, come on up. You're going to stand right here and be sworn in.
Do solemnly swear that testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
All right, so sir, go ahead and come around here, have a seat to my left.
Sir, would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Daniel Coons.
And where do you work now?
Well, I am part-time temporary employed with the City of Chandler Police Department as a civilian criminal investigator for cold cases.
Where did you work before that?
Before that, I worked I finished working as a detective with the Chandler Police Department. Specifically, the last assignment was robbery homicide unit.
How long did you work for the Chandler Police Department?
Just over 30 years.
Can you walk us through your different assignments at Chandler Police Department?
Sure. After my basic training at the academy, I was assigned to patrol. I did that for a little bit. And while I was in patrol, I was assigned as a crime scene officer. Now that's still a patrol officer, but it's additional duties such as collecting evidence, processing crime scenes, taking photographs, things along those lines. After I did that, I went to crime prevention for a couple years. I did that and came back to patrol, found a calling to go into detectives. I became a family crimes detective for 5 years. And from there, I became a homicide detective. During that time, I was also assigned part-time. We don't have a full-time SWAT team, so I was on that for just about 20 years.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your training to become a SWAT officer and what a SWAT officer does?
So there are many jobs within SWAT. There's regular officers that typically will do entry. There's some that specialize in breaching, some specialize in grenadiers, and then we also have the snipers. So I was cross-trained to do the regular basic entry officer stuff, as well as I became a sniper, and eventually I became a sniper instructor.
Okay, so what kind of training did you have to go through to become a sniper and sniper instructor?
So the sniper training was a basic 40-hour course. I attended that with the FBI. And as time progressed, I would attend advanced sniper trainings so that I could enhance my skill set. And eventually, after having been on as a sniper for a while, I attended a 40-hour sniper instructor course.
Who is that with?
That was with the American Sniper Association.
As a trainer for snipers, what did that entail?
It entailed having to have a good working knowledge of the actual job, the ballistics that the rifles need to perform, knowing how to train new snipers, knowing how to keep snipers that have achieved certification to keep their skill sets up, and to keep meeting the mandates of what would be expected of a police sniper.
Did you ever become a shooting reconstruction expert?
I did.
Can you tell us what does that mean?
It means that I attended a course. It was a 40-hour course where it was completely hands-on. There was classroom, a lot of hands-on with you not only see the results of different impacts and things like that, but you watch it happen. And then in some cases, you actually get to make it happen. And then after that, you, as a class, you work together, putting things back together. And at the end of the 40 weeks, there is a test that you have to pass to get certification.
You said 40 weeks?
Or sorry, 40 hours, sorry.
So what does, I guess, shooting reconstruction mean, if you had to explain that to us?
It means being able to take information from a scene and being able to put it together to reconstruct as best as possible or humanly possible what happened. For instance, you have bullet strikes. In some cases, you can actually get a good angle or ballistics information so that you can backtrack it and get an approximate area where the shooter had to have been. In many cases, you can help articulate whether information given to you was factual or if the information given to you was not. And this is very handy when there are no witnesses and you only have basically the person saying what happened.
Is there any type of certification process to be a shooting reconstruction expert?
Yes, at the end of that course, I had to successfully complete a test in order to get certification.
And when did that occur?
That was in, I believe, early 2017.
Who is that through? Who puts that on?
It was with Michael Haig,
And
his
who is-
company.
Who is Michael Haig?
He is part of a duo, father-son duo, that have become quite renowned for their ability to do ballistics and then teach it and train other people with it.
And have you utilized those skills that you learned in that shooting reconstruction course as a detective since then?
Yes, many times.
I assume you passed the certification test.
I did.
So on July 11th of 2019, were you working as a detective at that time for the homicide unit at the Chandler Police Department?
Yes, I was.
During the weekdays, what were your, I guess, work hours normally?
My normal work hours were Monday through Thursday, about 7 to 5.
When you are working as a detective, we've heard a patrol is out driving around. What are you guys doing?
Well, we carry a caseload. So many times we are working on the cases that we've taken previous days or weeks ahead of time. We're trying to come to a conclusion for those particular cases. But many times we also will have our radios on, just kind of listening to what's going on.
So are you at your office is at the main police station?
Correct.
Okay. On July 11th of 2019, did you hear some police radio traffic of a shooting at 5531 South Four Peaks Place?
Yes, I did.
Did you respond to the scene?
After collecting some equipment and putting it in my vehicle, yes.
Is that normal then for detectives with homicide to go out to the scenes?
For the unit at the time, yes, it was.
Can you describe for us what the scene looked like when you arrived?
There were police vehicles around. There were officers that had established a perimeter. Some crime scene tape was already put in place. And they basically had frozen the scene.
Do you recall about how far away this scene was from the station where you were located?
15, 20-minute drive.
When you arrived there, were other detectives arriving? How does that work?
There were several of us that had self-deployed and we were in various stages of being on our way there. So other detectives did arrive.
How do you decide which detective is going to do what at a scene when you all just show up there?
Well, a lot of times it's just a matter of who speaks up first saying, I'm going to take case. If it's after hours, then the person that's on call will usually be the person to do it. But if it's during regular business hours, it's kind of like a little wrestling match to figure out who's going to end up taking it.
What role did you get?
I got assigned the scene.
Okay. What does that mean to be assigned scene?
So the scene work, assigned scene, means that you're responsible for making sure that the scene is processed properly, accumulate whatever evidence is necessary, report back to the actual case agent your findings so that they can stay aware of how things are transitioning and being learned, and then they can start making informed decisions on what the next step is going to be.
Do you do that alone or do you have help?
It depends on the scene. In this particular case, I had Detective Duncan along with me.
And do you have any, does Chandler Police Department have any like crime scene specialists or people that come up to help as well?
Yes, when I left the crime scene officer program, they had actually started a civilian program so that they could free up the officer's responsibility. So Chandler has several crime scene techs that will respond out when called.
And was someone called out to that scene?
Yes.
Do you sort of, as the scene agent, help, I guess, tell them what to do? Are you the person who's overseeing the whole scene?
It's more of a collaborative effort. We do provide direction on things that we're specifically interested in, but I've worked with them for many years, so it's pretty easy for us to just understand some of the basics that have to be done, such as overall photographs. Before we even think about manipulating anything or marking anything, we want to try to capture the scene as it was that we walked into it.
As the scene agent, did you create a diagram to just reflect what the scene looked like?
Yes.
And is that to scale?
It's not to scale. It's close, but it's not to scale.
Your Honor, if I can have my paralegal approach with Exhibit 5. And I think there's a second page in there.
It is behind, but it's not exposed to the back. Yes.
And is that the sketch and then the second page measurements of that diagram that you made?
Yes.
Your Honor, the state will move to admit Exhibit 5.
Any objection?
If it's not to scale, I don't know how it will be helpful, but no objection.
All right, Exhibit 5 is admitted.
And if I may publish.
Go ahead.
That's not lit up. Oh, we might use the one behind you.
Right.
All right. Can I have the detective? Oh, never mind. There you go. Okay, so this is Exhibit 5, the first page. Is this sort of an overview of the entire residence as well as the items of evidence that you collected?
That is correct.
So we understand where we see these little yellow placards. What do those indicate on your diagram?
On this diagram, they indicate the items of evidence for that particular room.
Okay. And do they each have a number associated with them?
Yes.
And is the second page of your diagram a reflection of what each of those numbers refers to?
Yes, it is.
We see in this A, B, and distances. What is that?
So the reference points for this particular purpose, we did a triangulation method. So we take measurements from 2 known points in that room, and then we measure out to the item of interest. And then that was how we get a point A and a point B measurement.
All right, so at the first page here, that's the actual diagram. What is the reference points that you are using to make these distance measurements?
So the reference points are not depicted on this diagram, but in this particular room, if you look at the wall where items number 2 and 12 are, the upper or the left upper corner is B, and if you go straight down towards the kitchen area, that along that wall, that corner is A.
Okay, so when we see a reference measurement from A of 21 feet to the bat, we're talking 21 feet this way should be where the bat was?
No, you're talking 21 feet from that corner, straight line to the bat.
Okay. So whatever the closest measurement or closest way to get there would be?
Correct.
So the bat, it would be something like that.
Correct.
Okay. And then when we see reference point B for the bat, then you're talking from this point to the bat?
Correct.
Okay, just so we understand that. When Chandler Police Department goes to a scene like this, do they utilize any type of photography system to help better document a scene so that you can see things more clearly sometimes than with photographs alone?
Yes, depending on the scene, we would use a system called the Lizard Q.
What is Lizard Q?
It's, in essence, a 360-degree photographic system that you set up on a tripod inside or wherever your location is, inside, outside. And you start the process, and the internal computer for this system specifically takes a set number of pictures where it's overexposed all the way to underexposed, and the images in between. And it does this at various locations along the path to create enough overlapping images, and then those images are stitched together and actually create a 360-degree sphere of the scene.
Did you have to get trained on how to use Lizard Q?
There was some training involved, yes.
If, again, my paralegal can approach with Exhibit 139, you can take a look at that. Do
Okay.
you recognize a thumb drive that is in Exhibit 139?
Yes.
What is on that thumb drive?
On this thumb drive will be the Lizard Q spheres.
Okay. And is there a reader on there so that you can actually view it?
Correct.
There's a piece of paper in there as well. What is that?
The piece of paper is a set of instructions on how to use the Lizard Q viewer so that you can view the spheres.
And did you initial the thumb drive to indicate that you had viewed it and you recognize that as the Lizard Q that you created on July 11th of 2019?
I have.
Or did you actually create that?
I created the thumb drive.
And that's your thumb drive that you put it onto?
Yes.
All right. State will move to admit Exhibit 139.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
139 submitted.
Judge, at this point, might I ask the witness to come down here to utilize the Lizard Q? I can sit at the table, but it needs to be put into a computer to do that, and I don't think we can hook it up there. All right, so if you can insert that on the laptop in there. Yeah, thank you. I'm sure I might have to log in. I just might have to log into my computer, sorry. Oh, nope, still like. I will let you come there. All right. Can you talk us through, so you've opened the thumb drive to where that's at. How do you get to viewing this program?
So first, you'll have to double click on
Hold on, one sec, I'm sorry, we're waiting for it to. Yes, the USB is in that laptop up there on the podium. There, yeah.
So first you need to double click on the lizardqviewer.exe so it can open it up. And then it's going to ask you where to look for the spheres. That's going to be and then you just double click on the sphere you choose to open up, and it will open it up for you.
Can you make that larger so we can?
Waiting for it to respond.
Got it. Okay.
So once you have the sphere open, you want me to just?
Yeah, if you can just tell us how to work that first, and then we'll ask a few questions.
So once you have the sphere open, if you depress the left mouse button, you can actually move the images around. Without depressing the mouse button, you can zoom in and you can zoom out with the scrolling wheel. If you depress the right mouse button and use the scrolling wheel, this will darken or lighten your sphere. It will give you the ability to look outside as opposed to just the photographs washing it out normally so you can see inside. With this particular program, you can open up multiple windows, but you'll really only be able to view one at a time, but you can go back and forth between them.
So for this sphere that we're looking at, we see Charles Vallow there, correct?
Yes.
And then there's some white cards that we see around the room. What are those?
Those are 3x5 cards that officers have dropped in the scene. A lot of times they'll do that to help identify to detectives items that they observed and to be a warning to other officers to watch out for these items as you're either moving through or exiting the scene.
Is the Lizard Q program then used prior to the scene being documented? And well, let me say this. We saw in your diagram, Exhibit 5, that there were little yellow placards or numbered items. Is that something that's actually done in the scene? So we were looking at the bat, for instance.
Correct. So in this particular moment in time, we just merely left it with the placards there. Again, it was to capture the scene as we as an investigative unit found it. There can be times that we'll do this first and eventually go through putting evidence placards down and then maybe do another sphere showing all the evidence placards.
So would it be fair to say that this is done to document the scene prior to police going through and having, maybe digging through areas to find potential evidence?
Right. It's much like when we do overall photographs with the 35mm camera. This is just another enhancement of that.
For this room where we see Mr. Vallow, do we have two different spheres?
Yes, in this particular room, I did a lower sphere and then I raised it on the tripod that you can see in it to another height. And then I did a sphere there. So we have a program that we can combine those and make it a measurement sphere. So we could do measurements linear, but not to and from the camera because of its limitations.
So what is provided here is without measurements.
That is correct.
And without anything being marked yet.
Aside from the 3x5 parts.
Can you show us the lower level sphere as well?
This is the lower level.
Okay, then the upper level one, sorry.
As you can see, your point of view has changed a little bit, but the room has remained the same.
Okay. And that's all using the same initial placement of that tripod, but just moving the camera height up higher or lower?
Correct. The tripod has the ability to elevate to the platform that the camera is actually on.
All right, thank you. Gunnar, could I have the witness go back to the?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm gonna turn this for now. So although that documents what the scene looked like that we saw prior to the marking of evidence, as a scene agent, do you still utilize photographs?
100%, yes.
Why?
It's just an added fail-safe. The lizard queue can, if you do the lizard queue, then you're restricted to just the view from where that camera is at. When we do overall photography, we actually move around and get it from different perspectives. This is just another tool in the ability to show what the scene looked like.
Did you also photograph rooms where the lizard queue was not used?
Yes.
When you photograph a scene, what is the process for that?
I'm not sure I understand.
Sure. When you enter a scene as a scene agent and you are looking at one like this, do you just go into the room where this person is and just photograph that area and that's it?
No, we would photograph the entire place to document it. The lizard queue, because of the volume that it takes and not necessarily information that would require the setup of a sphere, then we will just stick with the crime scene photos for those particular rooms.
Okay. So I can have my paralegal approach with exhibits 6 through 138. You can look at those and let me know if you recognize what those are photographs are.
Okay.
Do you recognize all those photos?
Yes, I do.
Do they accurately depict 5531 South Four Peaks Place, both before and during and after processing it?
Yes, through various stages of the investigation.
Your Honor, if I can have those shown to the defendant.
Yeah.
Now, Detective, when you guys are processing a scene, in addition to photographing it, are you also looking for items that you may want to collect and actually bring back with you?
That's correct.
Can you talk to us about what procedures you use to collect and impound physical items of evidence that you're going to take with you?
Sure. It depends on the type of physical evidence, what the circumstances of the offense are. So the type of collection method can vary, but inevitably we'll identify it first, then we'll document it with photographs, and then we will come up with the plan that we're going to recover the evidence. And typically on scenes, I like to work in a particular direction collecting evidence. Others have their own method, but that's the method I typically use. And then I work along with the crime scene tech, and we'll go through exactly what we talked about. We'll have the overall pictures taken. We identify things that we believe are going to be relevant. And then we'll, for identification purposes, we'll usually affix some form of evidence tag, a marker, things along those lines. Not all items are actually taken. Some are actually just documented because it's impractical to remove certain things, such as a slab of concrete or something like that. So depending on the situation. So after it's documented, first with photograph, placard, photographed again, and then we will collect it. If DNA is an issue, the crime scene tech will be the one that'll take care of the method for doing it, and they will take the protective measures, whether they do gloves, swapping gloves out, or they do face masks, depending upon the nature of the evidence. If it's super DNA critical, then we will pull all the precautions out. In this particular case, it was not DNA critical.
Do you still wear like gloves or anything like that when you are collecting these items of evidence?
Absolutely.
And are you using them and changing them to ensure, for instance, you don't transfer blood from one item onto another?
Right, and typically that's what our crime scene techs will do. We will direct the method or the order we're going to collect, and then we'll go through that. And they'll be the ones that'll photograph. They'll change the gloves, place it in the envelope. Typically it's a paper envelope. And then we'll move on to the next item and repeat the method.
So in this case, I'll put 5 back up if I can have the Alamo. Thank you. What was your process for how you wanted to go through this home in reviewing, collecting the evidence?
So for this particular method, I chose to work from the north towards the south, collecting as we went. Item 1 being the hat, which is at the north end of the room. And then it was kind of a toss-up between 2 and 3, so I just decided to go ahead and go for 2, and then we would work our way down from there.
Okay. And so we see in this diagram, north is up this direction.
It's to the left of the image, yes.
And so in the photographs that you're taking of these individual items, do you see those placards or something that shows a 1?
Yes.
Now you talk about in this that there are scenes where you may have difficulty collecting an item. In this scene, did you actually cut out some pieces of evidence to bring back with you.
Yes, and that's why you'll see numbers higher than what was originally in the room associated to those items.
When you are processing a scene, do you always know what may be relevant or not relevant?
Not always immediately.
Is that one of the reasons why the entire residence is photographed instead of just what appears to be relevant here in that one room?
Correct.
So that later, if anyone wants to look at another room, that's been documented adequately.
Right.
When you're going through a house, even though you walk in and you see Charles Vallow on the ground there, are you still checking all of the rooms to see if there could potentially be something of evidence there?
Well, certainly. I'm no stranger to not having all of the information initially when I show up. So I will go through and I'll look at the residence to see if there's anything that actually stands out immediately. And maybe I'll be able to ask a few questions of whoever's doing the interviews to see if there's any relevance to it.
So are you looking for instance, any bloody items?
That would be important.
Are you looking for any projectiles or anything else that might be not in this room?
Certainly. Bullets pass through walls.
Are you looking for any evidence that might be related to this individual, Charles Vallow, like wallets or things like that that might have been left somewhere in the house?
Yeah, anything that could properly identify who was or may have been present at the time.
And that's sort of all those photographs as well.
Correct.
When you photograph a scene, do you start at the outside of the home?
Yes, we will typically start at the outside and work our way in and carefully avoid the items of evidence that have been readily made identifiable.
So Exhibit 6 here, what are we seeing here?
So this would be the front of the residence. It faces west. And we're looking at the main entrance that's just off to the right of the closed single garage door, and that door is open.
Connor, we're gonna have to object. We haven't agreed to admit any of these pictures that are being posted.
I'm sorry, I did show them. The state will move to admit exhibits, 6 through 38, or 138.
Any objection?
To some of them, I mean, they're very similar, and I don't think that they all need to be put on there.
So your objection is that some of them are cumulative?
Yes. Yes, Your
Right.
Honor.
Let me see them. What numbers?
Yeah, which number, sorry?
6 through what?
138.
Right. Do you have specific ones that you believe are cumulative?
Yeah, I'd have to go back through to get them specifically. I have some.
Well, let me browse them. All right. While I've reviewed exhibits 6 through 138, while many of the exhibits show multiple pictures of the same items, there's no two pictures that are the same. They show different angles, different distances, different perspectives, and in some cases, the item as it was found, as opposed to someone picking it up and showing it from a different angle. So they're somewhat cumulative, but the court will admit those exhibits. They may help assist the jury in visualizing the scene and determining where things were at the scene.
So we had talked about Exhibit 6 being the front of the house. The door that you were talking about there, is that the door we saw in the lizard queue that was in that front room?
Yes, that's the double front main door.
Exhibit 7 and 8, was that to document a vehicle that was there?
Yes, again, to try to do overalls of the scene to show how it was when we got there.
At that time, did you know whose vehicle that was?
I did not have the opportunity, nor did I run the license plate of it, but it was documented, and I believe later on it was learned.
Okay, thank you. But not something you were responsible for?
Correct.
When we get to Exhibit 9 and then 10, is this sort of coming up to, and I'm going to pull this back a little.
Yes, that's approaching closer to the door.
11, which way are we looking as we enter the door here on 11?
So you would be looking to the northeast, northeast.
And you had talked about in a diagram a hat. Is that sort of what we see here?
Correct.
Okay. Is Exhibit 12 sort of looking the opposite way from that sort of vantage point,
Correct.
or south?
Southeast, yeah.
And does Exhibit 13 show us what the front entryway looks like?
Correct. So this image would have been taken from the northeast corner of the main room there.
We can see in this then the hat with the placard of 1.
Correct.
So when we are looking at your diagram, Exhibit 5, and we see the 1, that's what that's referring to.
Correct.
Exhibit 14, can you tell us our perspective of what we're looking at here?
So you're standing in roughly the northwest corner of the room, just down from the entryway, and you're looking south.
So we start to see some of those white cards there. Is this before you have added in the yellow placards?
Correct. This would have been part of the overall photographic effort.
So when we're looking at this house, I'm going to put up Exhibit 15. Can you describe for us this wall here? Sort of, can you go all the way around that?
So that wall with the mirror itself is blocking where the kitchen is. There's an entrance to the kitchen to the right of that wall. And again, you could get to the kitchen through the left opening as well, but I think there's also like a family room by that area.
Okay. But it's open, one could walk through either of these ways and come around back out the opposite door?
Yes.
Okay. So Exhibit 16, we see Charles as he lay when fire has left him at this point.
Correct.
So the items we see on him, we've heard of them cutting his shirt and things like that. This is you documenting how he was when you started to come into the scene,
Correct.
after fire's already treated him and determined he was deceased.
Yes.
Over here, we start to see an area. What is right over there?
So just past that most southern index card is a hallway that extends to a bathroom and I believe at least 2 bedrooms.
Looking sort of to the north, what is this hallway here?
So now we're just looking north past the entryway. You can see the hat in the right part of the image there. And that would lead up to the master bedroom garage.
When you are looking at a scene like this, where you have a shooter, are you wanting to document all the different views of the items and the victim where they lay in the scene?
Yes, it's important to establish where things were at when we found them.
Now, are you able to tell us, for instance, if a casing rolled or a bullet rolled as fire is there or initial officers coming through? yourself?
Having not been present to see it, I would not be able to tell you if any item happened to have been manipulated.
Does 19 show us part of that hallway that we're talking about to the bedrooms?
Yes, it does.
And then right next to it, would that be the sort of doorway into the kitchen?
Correct. That's past this mirror on the left would be where the wall rounds a little bit and leads to the kitchen.
So exhibit 21 here, we see this hat. Why, and 22 that you marked as number one, why do you collect something like that?
The indications to me, initial assessment was that there was some kind of a struggle that took place. And it was unknown at the time who the hat belonged to. So it was decided that this could be important.
Are you given more than one chance to go through a house and try to collect evidence, or is it sort of a one-time shot?
Usually it's a one-time shot.
So if you aren't sure if something is relevant, do you collect it?
Yes,
So that later, if you determine it is, you have it?
correct.
And if you determine it's not, then no harm, no foul?
Well, I don't know about no foul, but yeah.
So in this case, did you know whose hat that was?
I did not.
I'm going to put up 15 first. In the diagram, we had seen a number over in this area. What was that?
The item should be marking the baseboard, and there is a bullet strike in the baseboard.
All right, I'm putting up 23 here, and then I'm going to put up 24. What are we looking at here?
So what you're looking at is the actual bullet strike where it peeled away a portion of the baseboard, but remained embedded in the baseboard.
So I'm going to put up, as we kind of go closer, 24, 25, 26. Did you eventually show in 27 that you guys pulled back some of that board to get to show what was embedded in there?
Correct. And at some point, we were needing to recover that projectile.
Okay. And so in 28, does this reflect, now you've kind of photographed what it looked like when you first saw it, and then as you peeled it back and the actual bullet or projectile that was removed from there?
Correct.
All right. And 29, show that bullet from a different angle?
Yes.
When you were looking at this, and I'm going to put 30 and 31, was there actually some sort of white paint transfer on part of that?
There's a little bit of transfer of material to the nose of the bullet, yes.
I can have my paralegal approach with 243 and 245, or sorry, 243 and 235. Detective, do you recognize what those are?
Yes, I do.
What are those?
This would be the section of baseboard that we removed from the wall, as well as the projectile that we had removed from the baseboard.
Okay, I'm going to put up 34 here. Does that show sort of after you pulled out that section of that baseboard?
Yes, after it was cut out.
Okay. And then it's the projectile that you recovered in there? From that location, the other exhibit?
The other exhibit is the projectile that was recovered from there, yes.
State will move to admit 243 and 235.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
You said 243 and 245?
35.
Oh.
243 and 235.
It's ordered admitting 243 and 235.
If I can have my paralegal go retrieve that. So I'm going to put up, to give us again a different perspective, 17 here. We've talked about, as you're kind of working your way down, you told us you started with the hat, then you went over to the baseboard, and then you went back to the west wall.
Yes.
And so we see in this photograph, Exhibit 17, what you have marked as item 3. What was that?
That was the baseball bat.
I'm going to show Exhibit 35. Is that a closer up of that bat?
Yes, it is.
Were photographs taken of the sort of edge of the bat itself?
The
The
fat edge, I guess.
The fat edge.
Sure.
It's
I don't
called
know
bat.
nomenclature of the bat. So yeah,
Not the handle. How's that?
yes.
When you were looking at this, were you looking for any blood? And I'm going to put up 37, 38, 39, or any biological material?
We were looking for visible evidence, yes.
Okay. Did you observe any yourself?
I did not.
Did the edge look pristine and clean to you, visibly?
Visibly, I did not see any sort of biological evidence on it.
Did you note any biological evidence anywhere on the bat that was visible to you?
I did not.
This will parallel with the approach with 249. Do you recognize what 249 is?
Yes, I do.
And is that the bat that we have seen in these photos marked as item number 2? We see here in Exhibit 35.
Yes.
State will move to admit 249, Your Honor.
Any objection? 248 and 249 are admitted.
So that was item number 3. I'm going to put up Exhibit 40. Do we see a placard there for number 4?
Yes.
And what was item number 4? And I'm going to put up Exhibit 42 here.
It is a full metal jacket projectile.
And in 43, does that show a different angle of that projectile?
Yes.
So this projectile was recovered to the east, maybe northeast of Charles Vallow.
Yes.
And was there any visible damage to this projectile?
There was some deformation to the projectile.
If I can have my paralegal approach with 239. Do you recognize 239?
Yes, I do.
And what is 239?
This would be what's identified in the picture as item number 4, the projectile that was found close to the body.
State will move to admit 239.
Objection.
No objection.
239 is admitted.
When you are photographing this scene, are you, again, we know this is after fire has been there.
Yes.
Were you present when fire was there?
I believe their engine was still there when I arrived on scene, but they were not inside.
So were you present when they were working on Mr. Vallow in the home?
No,
So do you know whether or not they had moved this projectile at all?
I do not.
When you were looking at Mr. Vallow himself, I'm going to put up 41, did you notice something on his left hand?
On the left hand, yes.
What did you notice on his left hand?
Substance consistent with apparent blood.
When you were looking at Mr. Vallow, did you note any other blood on his left arm?
I did not see any.
And when you are looking at Mr. Vallow, are you looking at the rest of his body to see if you noted any blood on his right arm?
Correct. I did not see any on the right arm. I did not manipulate the body until the medical examiner showed up.
So visibly, as he laid there in that supine position on the back with his arms out, what you were able to see, did you see any other blood like we observed on his left hand anywhere else?
On his chest, there was a little bit of blood, but on his extremities, I did not see any.
And so when we talk about his chest, is this the blood that we see here, sort of?
Above and below the pads.
Did the blood to Mr. Vallow's left hand stand out to you in any way?
Yes, it was interesting that it's just on that one particular part, but it's not completely surprising.
Was there any blood on the floor around where his hand was?
No.
So although we've heard of blood pooling underneath him, there was no blood around his hand as it laid there.
Correct.
So going back again to Exhibit 17, we've now talked about 1, 2, 3, and 4, correct? Do we see a
Yes.
placard number 5 there?
Yes.
What was placard number 5? And I'm going to put up Exhibit 45 now.
It was a shell casing.
And I'm going to put up 46 to be closer of it. And 47. Were you able to determine what caliber that was?
Yes, it belonged to a .45 automatic pistol.
Now, as a police officer, do you have a semi-automatic pistol yourself?
At least one.
Okay. And I guess as a reserve officer, do you still have some?
I'm not a reserve officer. I'm just retired. But yes, I still possess firearms.
All right. So in terms of a semi-automatic handgun and seeing this type of casing, can you tell us when you fire a gun, where does this come from? What is that?
So in this particular image, we are looking at what's commonly called a head stamp. That's going to be the opposite end of where the actual projectile would be inserted into the casing. The circular ring that you see in the head stamp there is actually what's called the primer, and that's what the firing pin hits to initiate the primer charge, which ignites the powder and then sends the projectile through the barrel.
So if I put up 48 here, we have a projectile that goes through the barrel. What is this item here? It's casing.
So this is what's left of the cartridge. So it's the casing. This is what holds the powder charge. It holds the primer, and it holds the projectile all in one unit until it's initiated with the firing pin striking the primer. After the charge starts the projectile down the barrel, then the most semi-automatic weapons will actually, the slide will start moving back to the rear, and there's a piece of the slide called an extractor that goes around that back rim of the projectile there, or around the head stamp, and it pulls it backwards out of the chamber. And then it completes the cycle going all the way to the rear, where it hits what's called an ejector, and that kicks the casing out of the gun and readies it to go forward, stripping a new cartridge off the magazine, if there is one, and loading that into the chamber ready for the next shot.
So when you fire the gun, projectile goes out the barrel and this casing gets kicked out.
Correct.
So I'm going to go back again to Exhibit 17, where we see 5. And I'm going to put up Exhibit 49. To the south of 5 here, did you find another casing?
Yes.
Is that what we see in Exhibit 49 and 50 as placard 6?
Yes, it is.
So were those located in the generally in the same location?
Fairly close to each other.
When a casing is ejected from a gun, do they just plop down and stay right where they landed?
No, there are many different types of firearms out there, so the casings can eject in different directions. Some will, or most will, eject out to the right. Some will go farther back towards the right, some will go forward, some will go center, some actually kick higher up in the middle. It really depends on the manufacturer, the process, how the person's holding the firearm. So there are a lot of things about it, but there's usually sufficient energy designed in it so that it kicks the casing out so it doesn't interfere with the feeding of the next cartridge.
In your experience firing guns, can casings bounce or roll or move after they are ejected?
Yes.
Item that we see is number 6 and number 50 there. What caliber casing was that?
It's a little blurry.
Do you recall if it was the same 45 caliber as the other one?
They were both 45 caliber.
I can have approach with 238 and 240. Do you recognize 238 and 240?
Yes.
What are those?
These are the casings recovered from the main room where the body was.
What we saw as 5 and 6 in the exhibits?
That's correct.
State will move to admit 238 and 240.
Any objection to 248 and 240?
No objection.
248 and 240 are admitted.
238 and 240.
Oh, I'm sorry. 238 and 240? Okay, they're admitted.
Now, do the police move the body when you're processing the scene? Do you go around and move Mr. Vallow around?
No,
Do you have to wait for someone from the medical examiner's office to come do that?
that is correct.
Sort of the body is their responsibility?
Yes,
Are you present while they're doing that?
absolutely.
And are you looking for any other evidence that may be on, around, underneath Mr. Vallow?
Correct.
In this case, did the medical examiner's office come and remove Mr. Vallow's remains?
Yes, they did.
Once his remains were removed, did you document by photographing, we see here in 53, the blood that was left behind?
Yes, typically we would call this the void image to show what it looked like after the body has been removed.
Now, is the blood been moved somewhat by the body itself being moved?
Correct. Part of the process is the medical examiner's investigator will manipulate the body by rolling it from one side or the other to get a good look at the side that's not visible with how it was laying. And then they'll work on manipulating the body into the bag for transport.
So looking at the void or the blood pool that we see here, has it been altered somewhat from what we saw or observed while Mr. Vallow's body was there due to the movement of his remains?
That would be safe to say, yes.
Okay. Did you and other officers clean up that blood pool?
Yes.
And in doing so, did you observe anything on the floor?
Yes. Underneath, well, once the blood was cleared off, we could actually see a defect in the wooden floor that was consistent with the projectile strike.
All right, I've put up exhibit 56. There's a placard number 13 there. Is that far away so we can see the location of where that is in perspective to the room?
Yes.
Having seen Mr. Vallow's remains in the room and then having them removed, were you able to determine approximately where this defect that we see marked as 13 was located in relation to Mr. Vallow's body?
Yes, it would have been consistent with being under his left shoulder.
Did you take closer up photos of that defect?
Yes.
Can you put up 59 that shows that placard? Is this what you were talking about?
That is correct.
How did you, well, let me ask you this. Did you look at the rest of the floor to see if there were anything else that looked like that?
Yes, that was a consideration. So we did look at the rest of the floor.
So you went through that whole room to see if you found any similar type of defects on it?
Correct.
Did you?
No.
So this was the only one that looked like that?
Yes.
And I'm going to put up 58. So we see other defects in the ground. What made this different?
The size of it, the directionality, the fact that it was directly underneath the shoulder where we observed an exit wound, and the fact that there was a projectile found on the floor in proximity to this defect.
Was it, let me ask you this. As a person who has processed crime scenes, fired guns themselves, did it appear to you consistent with a bullet strike?
Yes, it did.
And what were you basing that on?
The way the indentation is and how it tapers up, coming away from the body in the same direction that the projectile was located.
Did you and other detectives remove that piece of wood?
Yes, with great pain, yes.
All right, putting up Exhibit 60. Is that to show the piece removed and Exhibit 61 to show the actual piece?
Correct.
And did you write on it so that you would be able to later look at that piece and know how that fit into the puzzle?
Yes, it was important to make sure to establish directionality on that piece.
If I can have my paralegal approach with 240. I can have my paralegal approach with 244. Do you recognize 244?
I do.
And is that the actual piece of floor that was removed from 5531 South Four Peaks Place?
Yes.
State will move to admit 244.
Any objection? 244 is admitted.
And is that what then we see here in Exhibit 61?
It is.
Obviously, this is inside plastic, but this is the piece you're talking about.
Correct.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the rest of the house, and then eventually I'm going to come back to this. You told us that.
Would now be a good time to take our
Sure.
afternoon
Yes.
recess? Since we're close to 3, why don't we take our afternoon recess, stretch break, et cetera? Please remember the admonition. We'll resume in about 15 minutes.
All rise for the jury. you note here?
So there was again another bag, and more specifically, there was a pistol that was laying on the floor.
We start with 72 here. Was that just like a garbage bag with some clothes in it?
Yes.
So of more relevance to you was what was next to it.
Correct.
What did you find there? What is this orange thing there? And we see a whole lot of placard numbers.
Right. So the placard numbers are obviously identifying particular items that are going to be seized as evidence. That we have the orange bag with what appears to be a gun box inside, and then we have the pistol. And the 3 placards next to the pistol are specific for the pistol itself, the magazine from the pistol, and potentially the chambered round in the pistol.
Okay. So 74, is that a close-up of that pistol?
It is.
What kind of pistol was that?
Pardon?
What caliber was it?
It's a 45.
Is that the same caliber as the casings that you had found in the front room next to Charles?
Yes.
Does this show another angle of that pistol in 75?
Yes, looking at the top of the pistol.
When the pistol, as we see, is picked up in 76, the individual's wearing gloves. Why is that?
Again, to help preserve the evidence in the event that DNA were to need to be done, we could articulate that we did not touch it with our bare hands to impart our DNA onto it.
Are you visually looking at this gun to see, and this is 77, if there is any visible biological evidence, blood on this gun?
Yes, we do look at them to help determine that.
And did you observe any biological evidence, any blood or what appeared to be blood on this handgun?
No, ma'am.
If you had observed that, would you have noted it and photographed it and documented it?
Yes.
Now, when you got this gun, was it loaded?
Yes.
And in 78 and 79, is that photographs of the magazine in the gun?
Correct.
So when we talk about the magazine, I'm going to go back to showing Exhibit 76. Where is that in this picture?
So you can see the base of the magazine at the bottom of the grip.
And why is the magazine removed?
Well, we have to make the weapon safe. And that's the first step in making it safe, is to remove any more source of ammunition.
So how do you make that safe then?
Well, manipulate the slide to force the extractor to pull the cartridge out, and the ejector kicks the cartridge out.
Also in this photo, there was this orange bag. And you had told us that inside of it, we can kind of see the corner here. We see it better too. Did you move an item from that orange bag?
Yes.
And I'm going to show 83, 84. What is that we see there?
The gun box that is consistent with the firearm that's laying on the floor.
So consistent with the 45 caliber handgun.
Correct.
And that was inside this orange bag. Was there any live rounds? And I'm going to show you Exhibit 85. Also orange bag.
Yes.
And it's a round.
Yeah, cartridge has not been fired.
We'll start then by having my paralegal can take up exhibits 237 or 246. She can approach them at 237 and 246. Do you recognize 237 and 246?
Yes,
And is that the gun and the magazine that we see here in Exhibit 76?
it is.
The gun that was found in that pink room?
Correct.
State will move to admit 237 and 246.
Any objection?
Is Mr. Coons saying that he didn't take those, but he recognizes them from being in evidence? Is that correct?
I think he testified he recognizes them to be the same items from the scene.
No objection.
237 and
246.
237 and 246 are admitted.
Now I have my paralegal approach with 247, 248, and 236. Sorry. Do you recognize 247, 248, and 236?
Yes, I do.
And are those what we saw in Exhibit 83, the gun case, as well as in 73, the orange bag that the gun case was in? And hold on. What we see in 85, the single live round that was found inside that bag.
Correct.
State will move to admit 247, 248, and 236.
Any objection?
Just a foundation, Your Honor. If he could give a serial number or something that could authenticate those.
Well, he testified that those were the items that he recovered from the scene, so I guess you can question him about that on cross. Give me the numbers again.
247, 248, and 236.
Those items are admitted.
I'm going to show you, as you continued sort of in this hallway, Exhibit 88. Do you, can you put us into perspective of where that is? I'm going to put 19 sort of back up. Where is, what we see, this room with the blue on it, Exhibit 88?
So those two doorways would be on the south side of the hallway that leads up to the pink or maroon room. Specifically, the blue one would be the most southwestern bedroom of the home, and then the other doorways to the hall bathroom.
Okay. So again, did you go into this blue room, and look for any potential items of evidence?
Yes.
So in the room with the sort of child themes on it, did you find anything bloody in there?
No, ma'am.
Any ammunition in there?
No.
In the pink room, we saw the gun. Did you see any, did you look in the floor of that room to see if there was any blood drops in the pink room?
Yes.
So I'm going to go back 1 second to 87. So on this floor and the bed and around here, did you notice any blood in that room?
No.
No blood swiped across a wall?
No.
No blood on that orange case?
The orange bag?
Correct.
No.
No blood on the black case for the gun?
No.
Or the extra magazines that were in there, any blood on those?
No. None seen.
Okay. So then in the blue room, did you do the same sort of thing? Look to see if there was any bloody clothing, any blood swipes, any blood drops, that sort of thing in there?
Correct. No items of bloody anything was discovered in there.
Okay. And nothing on the floor either?
Correct.
When we go to 92, you said that was the hall bathroom next to it?
Yes.
Do we see that in 93 and 94 here?
Yes.
Did you look in everything, like even the sinks, to see if you saw blood there?
Yes.
Along the countertop to see if you saw blood there?
Correct.
Did you note any bloody items, any that was anywhere in that bathroom?
I did not.
When you were walking down that hallway to those rooms, did you look on the floor there to see if there were any blood drops or blood trails or swipes of blood on the wall?
Yes.
Did you observe any there?
No.
So 98 here, can you put us in perspective of what we're seeing?
So this would be towards the feet of the body, where the kind of the hall splits to the kitchen and then to the bedrooms that we were just discussing.
Okay. 99, is this like a lanyard that was hanging on the wall there?
Yes.
So wasn't knocked off or anything?
No, it's where we found it.
And as you go through 99 there, is that how you entered, one of the ways you could enter into the kitchen?
Correct.
And is this sort of a view of that?
Yes.
So in the kitchen, did you look on the floor there to see if there were any blood drops?
Yes.
Along the cabinets to see if there were blood drops there?
Yes.
When you got to the sink, I'm going to put exhibit 103 and then 104. Did you observe a small amount of what appeared to be blood on the faucet itself?
Yes.
Did you look sort of as well in the sink itself to see if there was any blood there?
Yes.
Did you observe any there?
Did not see any visible blood.
Now, when you're going through the house and looking to see if you note any bloody items or any other items of evidence, are you looking in things like trash cans?
Yes.
So was this a trash can in the kitchen, for instance?
Yes.
And did you note any bloody rags or towels or anything thrown in there?
No, ma'am.
Okay. You said that there was also sort of a living area in there.
Correct.
I'm going to put up exhibit 112 to get a better perspective of that. So is this the doorway we were talking about?
Yes.
And so the kitchen here opens up into the living room.
Correct.
Did you look through that area to see if you saw any blood on the floors?
Yes.
Did you observe any?
No.
Did you look through that area to see if there was any blood on any of the furniture or walls or anything like that?
Yes.
Did you observe any of that?
No.
In exhibit 111, where does this doorway lead?
That leads back out to the mirrored room, the main room where the body is.
So when we were talking about the two doorways, one sort of directly into the kitchen and the other sort of more towards the end of the kitchen living area.
Yes,
This is what you were talking about.
correct.
And in Exhibit 113, can we see sort of both of those doorways?
Yes,
Okay. And 114, overall perspective of that.
another perspective of it, yes.
So throughout this whole area, again, you're looking for anything that might be relevant because you have one chance to document it, correct?
Correct.
When we talk about 115 and we talked about the original layout of the house, is this that front entrance area again?
Yes, it is.
And where are we looking in this perspective?
So you were looking in a north direction.
Where does that head towards?
It heads towards the garage, the master bedroom, and I believe a room that could double as an office.
So when we go along this wall here that we see in 115, 116, 117, is this the sort of what we would call office or playroom?
Yes,
Okay. Did you look through there, see anything bloody in there?
we looked and found nothing.
Was there like a powder room in this area?
Yes,
And did you search that as well?
it was.
And again, you're looking in sinks and in trash cans?
Correct.
And did you observe in 121, 122, the trash can and toilet and sink, any bloody items there?
No,
Was there a laundry room in this area?
there was.
And I'm putting up 123 and 124. Did you look through the laundry area to see if you saw any bloody items in here?
It was looked through, yes.
So although there's some clothing and some folded towels, none of those had blood evidence on them.
Nothing that stood out with blood evidence, no.
And then again, even looking in the trash cans that we see in 126 and 127,
Correct.
one 128, are we now heading into the master bedroom?
Yes,
129, was there sort of an office set up in there as well, 130?
correct.
And are you, again, looking through the floor, looking everywhere for any items of evidence?
Correct. Anything to indicate that what happened in the other room transferred into this.
Okay. Or any cleanup from after it?
Correct.
As you went through this, did you do the same sort of thing, looking through the floor and walls, 132, 133, for any blood evidence?
Correct.
Did you observe any in the bedroom?
No.
Do you go into the master bathroom and check there as well?
Yes.
So 134, 135. Did you observe any evidence, blood evidence in the master bathroom?
It did not.
And again, checking even the toilet itself as well as the trash can
Yes.
that we see in 137 and 138. So other than the one drop or whatever smear of blood on the kitchen faucet, did you see any other blood evidence at the scene?
No.
Let me put that in a different way, other than what was around Charles's remains.
Correct. No trails, no swipes, nothing that other than the sink faucet in the kitchen and the area where the body was.
So you told us that you cleaned up the blood there and you saw that defect in the ground that was consistent, or in the flooring, that was consistent with a bullet strike, correct?
Correct.
When you were looking at this scene, actually I'm going to start with 15, did you note injuries to Charles Vallow himself?
Yes.
On the front of him, where did you note the gunshot wounds to him?
Immediately before the medical examiner arrived, the only visible gunshot wound was in the lower left abdomen area.
Did you learn one was in the chest underneath some of the medical debris?
Yes.
When you are looking at this scene, are you able to utilize part of your shooting reconstruction training to try to determine any type of trajectory, or if anything is consistent with trajectory based upon the scene itself, items that you are able to view there?
I do try to apply my knowledge of that to the scenes as I go to them and go through them, and with whatever evidence or information comes directly back to me.
Are you relying on, for instance, the location of Mr. Vallow?
That's part of it.
Are you relying on the location of the casings?
That's another part of it. Not a major part, but it is another part.
Are you relying on the location of the projectiles?
Yes.
When the medical examiner came, were you also able to see exit wounds on Mr. Vallow?
Yes, in conjunction with also the chest wound.
Okay. So when the medical examiner came, you saw a second injury to the front side of him.
Correct.
And where was that approximately?
In the sternum.
So for us, somewhere in,
About the center, maybe roughly the center of the chest.
okay. So, and the other one you said was in the abdomen.
Yes.
When the medical examiner was there, where did you observe other gunshot wounds on his back?
I observed another one that would have been just to the left of the spine, and then another one that would have been by the left shoulder blade scapula area.
Okay. Now, given the number of casings, did you start with an idea that there might be two shots?
Yes.
Given the number of wounds on Mr. Vallow, did that appear consistent with that theory?
Very much so.
So 2 entrances, 2 exits?
Yes.
When you saw the projectile that you recovered, that we see in Exhibit 20 on the side over here, that entered into that baseboard, given the injuries to Mr. Vallow and the projectiles and the location of this, were you able to determine any consistencies of where the shooter may have been when that occurred?
Approximate location, yes.
And how did you do that?
Based on the wounds to Mr. Vallow, the location of where the projectile had ended up, and where the casings were, the working theory at that point was that the firearm ejected the casings to the right, striking the wall where that has the curve there, and bounced back towards the west wall. The projectile would have continued on a relatively straight path and embedded itself in the baseboard at the other end of the room.
So would that have put the shooter somewhere in this area?
Yes.
And so that to you seemed consistent with one of the shots having gone through him and ended up what we see in Exhibit 20 over here in the baseboard, Mr. Vallow being somewhere over in this area.
Correct.
Okay. Given the information that you obtained, let me ask you this. Given the information that you saw at the scene there, again, with the casings, the injuries to Mr. Vallow, both to the abdomen and the shoulder, and then after you cleaned up the blood, the damage to the floor underneath the location of his left shoulder, were you able at that point to start have any concept or have a idea of what would be consistent with where the shooter may have been and where Mr. Vallow may have been for that shot?
Yes.
What did you base that on?
Again, a lot of the factors that have been discussed, the location of the projectile, item number 4, the defect in the floor that was underneath him, the location of the second casing. It was all consistent with the shooter having been at the feet, not necessarily right upon the feet of Mr. Vallow, but in that direction, close enough so that the projectile could again bounce off that wall, and land on the west wall,
The projectile or the?
or
casing?
the casing, sorry.
When you were looking at this scene, I'm going to put 56 up. Obviously, there's no exact, I'm going to move Mr. Vallow this way just to kind of be looking the same direction. Did this defect appear to be in the area of Mr. Vallow's shoulder?
Yes,
Now, Mr. Vallow had been rolled a couple times by the time you cleaned that scene up.
yes.
So you didn't like stick a rod through him there and see if that worked?
No, that would be inappropriate.
Are you even allowed to do that?
No.
It's a medical examiner frown on that.
Yes, the body is theirs by law.
So you're basically able to look at where he was located and say that that is consistent with being underneath his left shoulder.
Yes, and we did take measurements of the body before it was moved.
All right. So when you measured where the body was and then you cleaned up that blood and measured where that projectile divot was that consistent with where his left shoulder was?
Yes.
Given that information that you had at that time, were you able to draw any conclusions as to whether or not the evidence was consistent with Charles Vallow being laying on the ground when he was shot?
Very much so in the position that you see him. He was, the second shot that entered the abdomen would have been where he was lying.
Did you attend the autopsy itself?
I did.
And when you were at can you tell us what it means when you attend an autopsy as a detective?
So as a detective, we go to the medical examiner on the date that they're going to do the autopsy. There is the autopsy suite itself where the doctors and technicians work with the bodies. Observers will be outside of that suite, but able to communicate with the staff. There's a window where we can see everything that's going on. And like I said, we can communicate either by a phone that's on the wall or they'll come around and talk with us. We have the ability to observe everything that transpires. There's even a camera overhead that we can manipulate to get a different view, say the feet are toward the way.
I was gonna say inches,
Yes,
not feet, but inches.
correct.
And would that be a normal trajectory from hitting the wall to where they landed?
I am not surprised by seeing that, yes.
According to how fast they would be going. How fast does a casing come out of a gun? I don't really know.
I've never chronographed a casing coming out of a gun. I've only chronographed bullets. So I have no idea how fast a casing comes out. It doesn't come out with enough force to really hurt anybody.
So there weren't any divots in the wall or anything like that because.
There could be microscopic divots, but it'd be very difficult to find.
And you didn't find any that were visible to the eye?
Nothing that's caught my eye, no.
So were you there at the time when Alex did the walkthrough?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you were there. Did he describe where he was standing?
Sustained.
Did he show you physically where he was standing?
Sustained.
Was there a wall right next to where he was standing?
Sustained.
Your Honor, I'm not asking for the truth of the matter asserted. I'm saying he observed this person standing in that place.
Well, you can ask him if he observed Mr. Cox standing in that place.
Okay. Did you observe Mr. Cox standing in the room where he told you that the gun was?
I observed him standing in the vicinity that he indicated.
And was that in the hallway or in the main room?
Right. If the question is in relation to Mr. Cox showing or recreating or demonstrating, then the objection is sustained.
Where did you observe Mr. Cox standing when he went through the walkthrough to?
Well, that's the testimony that I'm saying is a form of hearsay. So please ask a different question.
I'm trying to understand, Your Honor. So what the witness observed is not relevant?
I didn't say that. Let's do a sidebar.
Okay, I would love that. Detective Coons, where would you place the shooter standing in that room?
I would place the shooter in the area of where the curve of the wall was and the kind of the hallway entry area, somewhere in that general area.
So would you have it, what direction would you place him standing? Facing, I mean, not standing, but facing.
For which shot?
The first one.
The first one in a more northeasterly direction,
Mhm. And the second?
in a more northern direction with a slight deviation to the east.
So would you have him stepping forward? Is that what you're saying?
No,
What direction would you have him moving?
I didn't say the shooter moved.
You're just saying that he shot from a different angle?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you think he was standing in the same location?
I don't know that.
So according to where you put him standing with the first shot, the casing bounced off of the wall to the right and landed to the left.
Correct.
And then where you have him standing in the second shot, the same thing happened.
Approximately, yes.
And how far apart were those casings found?
I don't have the specific measurement of how far apart they were. They were a few feet.
So they're a few feet apart.
Yes.
So if he was standing in the same place, would they be a few feet apart or would they be closer?
It depends on a different amount of things, like how was the gun being held? Was it canted to the side? Was it not? What the angle was? Could the shooter have moved? A little, but it would have been the same general vicinity.
But you said he didn't move, according to you.
I said I didn't say he moved.
So he could have moved because they were more than a foot apart, the casings found.
A little, yes. Would have been in the same general area.
So he could have taken a couple steps.
Perhaps could have slid the body sideways. Anything that you can do to the body, it could have been done in a short area.
And is that common in, I don't know with shooting, if is that common with someone to shoot once and then move and shoot again?
I'll sustain it on speculation.
In your experience as a firearms expert who fires a lot of guns, right? Would that be a common thing to do?
An objection is to speculation as to when, where, circumstances.
All right, I'll sustain the objection as to speculation.
Let's talk about stippling. The first shot, according to you, had stippling. Is that correct?
No,
It did not have any stippling.
none was observed.
And the second shot,
None was observed.
no stippling was observed.
Correct.
Is that what's in the ME's report?
I believe so.
That there was no stippling? Can I have a minute, Your Honor? When you were observing the autopsy,
Short break.
Detective Kuntz, you were the scene agent that day on scene, is that correct?
Primarily, yes.
Did you work for someone else before Chandler Police Department?
United States Army, Arizona Department of Corrections, a couple other little jobs after I got out of the Army.
Did you work for Gilbert Police Department at all?
No.
And as the scene agent that day, you talked about, you were there. Did you write a report about that day?
Yes, ma'am.
When did you write that report?
I don't know the day I sat down to write it. It was shortly after the event,
So close to July 11th, 2019?
close to it.
Within a week, maybe?
Again, I don't recall when I specifically started typing that.
There already?
Patrol officers,
Just them? The
fire department might have been there. Alex Cox was there. Other detectives arrived. I couldn't tell you the order of which everybody arrived.
And where did you park?
I parked north of the scene.
And then did you go directly into the house?
No, ma'am.
What did you do first?
We received a briefing of what patrol officers had learned. We learned that there was a body inside the residence, and we came up with an investigative plan.
Who did that debriefing to you?
I don't think anybody specifically ran the debriefing. We, as detectives, gathered around the patrol officers, and they informed us basically of what they had seen and what they had been told.
And who were those detectives with you?
Well, Detective Duncan would have been there with me. Detective Moffett would have been there. I didn't take a roll call of all the detectives there. Possibly Detective Inclin. I don't know.
Okay. And then where did you proceed after that debriefing?
Well, after the debriefing, I provided the information of what I had learned to Detective Kaminsky, who was still back at the police department, and gave him the information necessary to request search warrant for the residence.
To get the search warrant?
Yes, ma'am.
To have it issued?
To see if the judge would issue it, yes.
And how long did that take?
Don't believe we got word back from the courts until it would have been probably between 11:30, 11:45, and then we made entry shortly thereafter.
So is it your protocol that you can't enter until the search warrant is issued?
That is what we do once the scene has been made secure, yes.
Okay. And then when you entered, who entered with you?
Myself, the crime scene tech, we were the initial ones. I think Detective Duncan might have come in with us as well, but that would have been the extent of the initial entry.
Do you know the name of the crime scene tech that was with you?
Jordan,
Is that the last name or first name?
the last name.
And then what did you do after that?
Well, after that, we continued to go with our normal process of having photographs taken. I did the lizard Q spheres. I completed getting information necessary for the diagram that was presented, and continued to just do our job.
So is that protocol to do photographs first?
That would be our protocol, yes.
And then what do you do after that? I know that you were searching for the blood in all the rooms. When did that occur?
That occurs after the initial photographs are done. and then we can walk through and look in the particular areas that's been photographed already.
Okay, so the photographs are finished and then you guys kind of walk through.
Or at least finished in an area that we can actually walk through, yes.
Okay. And then when did you set up the tripod after, how long after that?
So the tripod was set up after the area had been photographed. So that way I wasn't interfering with anything. And that way we're not having the tripod in our original photographs.
Right, makes sense. And do you think, so Detective Duncan was with you going through the house?
I believe he was there, yes.
So it was basically the two of you or three of you going through room by room, or were you split up, or how does that work?
We would have divided and conquered a little bit to make the search a little bit more expedient. But that, again, you're slowed to the time frame of what it takes to do the overall photographs.
So the photographs took about how long?
I don't ever look at my watch to see how long it takes because it's a big house, as you're aware. And I let the crime scene tech do their job. I don't push them and tell them that TikTok, there's nothing like that. It's do your job, we'll follow along.
Okay, and you guys started that process at about 11:45?
I think the actual time would have been closer to noon that we would have started that process.
And about how long did it take to go through the whole house, and about how long was that process?
Again, for me, I don't document how long it takes for any particular task because each scene is different. I just focus on doing the tasks. I rarely take a look at my watch to see how much time I'm spending on it because I want to do the job. I don't care about the time it takes.
And you did not pick up any of the evidence that was marked. That wasn't part of your protocol, is to take the evidence into custody. Is that correct?
Most of the evidence I did not pick up, correct.
And whose job is that?
We usually defer to the crime scene techs to do that. There are times that we will assist them with doing it depending on what the item is.
So that day, was it Jordan who did that? Was he the crime scene tech that took that evidence?
She would have been the one that was collecting at our direction, yes.
And so you kind of pointed out as the detectives, and then they pick it up and...
Correct, because they're trained how to handle evidence, how to package evidence, how to process. So we work in tandem together. We're the investigative body, and they're the scientific portion of it.
Makes sense. Okay, what time do you think that well, let's ask this. After you're done with the photos, and then you're done with checking the house, and all of the evidence is picked up and logged, then what else do you do at the house? What else did you do at the house that day?
Well, you just bundled that up into like tiny little package, but it took a long time to get to the point that you're talking about. So my day pretty much involved the scene. As far as ancillary jobs to go somewhere else or do other things, now my day was pretty much spent there on Four Peaks.
Correct. Yeah. So when did you leave the residence then?
We secured from the house sometime between 4 and 4:30 p.m.
And what other tasks did I miss that you accomplished during that 12 o'clock to the 4:30 time? I just don't know what you were doing in there.
Well, we identify the proper or the evidence items. We're looking for other evidence items. I am still doing the diagram, so measurements need to be done. We have to wait for the medical examiner to arrive because we can't do anything with the body until they show up. And then once they show up, we pretty much stop with the other projects until we can focus on the body and get the body out of there, because there aren't very many investigators for the medical examiner in the county, so we don't want to tie them up longer than we have to. And then we'll resume searching or identifying information, evidence, collecting it, and working our way to a conclusion where we can leave the scene.
So after searching the whole entire house, did you guys search the backyard at all?
It was searched.
Did you do that or did someone else do
I
that?
did not.
Who would have been in the backyard searching?
It would have either been another detective or we would have asked an officer to do it.
And what would they be looking for?
Any blood evidence, anything to indicate, based upon the information we had of the event that took place inside that house.
So when you made your assessment, you were able to leave after that assessment was made, that everything was accomplished?
Oh, what assessment are you talking about?
That all the evidence was gathered and collected?
That I was satisfied that we had collected what we needed to collect?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Oh, is it showing?
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's, actually, let's just turn that off until we need it. Thank you.
So you stated earlier that the type of weapon that was found was a .45 caliber?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that a semi-automatic?
It is.
Okay. How is that different from like a revolver? What's the difference between that?
The build itself, I like to use simplistic terms when I describe what a revolver looks like. Most people are familiar with a Western movie. So the wheel gun, that's a revolver. What you see modern police officers carrying these days are semi-autos. So that's kind of the analogy I give to people that don't know guns.
And what's the difference between when you're shooting a semi-automatic or shooting a revolver, how fast you can shoot? Does that make sense?
The speed on which somebody can shoot is dependent upon the shooter themselves, the skill level they have, the weapon they might be using. There are a lot of circumstances and things that happen to be able to qualify that statement.
Right. And you have taken many gun classes, right, that we heard of?
And I'm an instructor, yes.
And you're an instructor. So when you're taking a gun class, is it common for them to say, is it common that they tell you to shoot center mass? Is that a common term?
That is what we train as police officers, is to shoot center mass. It has the highest probability of guaranteeing a hit on the adversary that you're trying to shoot.
Right. So if you were being attacked, you should point at center mass. Is that correct?
That is what's trained, and because stress can obviously create issues, but yes.
Is it a common term to say to center mass?
No,
In
that
training?
that is something that I've heard, but I wouldn't classify it as common.
Would you teach that in your class?
It depends on what class is and what we're actually doing. If it's standard officers, no, I don't tell them to always shoot to center mass, no.
If it was a novice who was like taking a gun class for the first time, would you teach them that?
No.
What would you teach them?
You would teach them to shoot till the threat went away, and that can be with one shot. It can be with more than one shot.
Okay, that's fair. So in this particular gun, the .45, When the shells are ejected, where do they go?
Out and away.
So in this particular gun, do they go to the right or to the left?
I've not test fired this particular gun. I believe that most semi-automatics do eject the casings out to the right. Whether it's high right, low right, I'm not sure. It could be farther forward, it could be farther back. I did not test fire this gun, so I cannot speak specifically to how this particular gun ejects, other than most likely to the right.
But it could go to the left?
No, not the way the ejection port is set up.
So no guns that are 45s could go to the left?
Certainly, you could have a left-handed gun set up that it would eject that way. But the way this particular gun is set up, the ejection port dictates which way that's going to go. When the slide cycles back and that extractor pulls the casing back, the ejector is usually located on the opposite side of the extractor, and that will kick it out of the actual ejection port of the slide.
So for someone like me who doesn't really understand guns too well, you would say that a right-handed gun, they would eject out of the right, but a left-handed gun, they could eject out of the left.
And they're very rare to see.
And do people have left-handed guns? I guess I never really thought about that.
Some people do.
If you're left-handed, you'd want that, I guess. Okay. So in this particular case, when you said in your report that the shells bounced off the wall, they had gone to the right, like they were supposed to. Is that correct?
That is what I was operating off of, yes.
And then they would have bounced to the left.
Yes, because that makes sense.
And they would have landed to the left of my husband. Is that where they were found?
Along the west wall.
Okay. But how close to the wall were they found?
The pictures show where they were found. They're relatively close to the wall, inches away.
I was gonna say inches.
Yes.
Not feet, but inches.
Correct.
And so would that be a normal trajectory from hitting the wall to where they landed?
I am not surprised by seeing that, yes.
According to how fast they would be going. How fast does a casing come out of a gun? I don't really know.
I've never chronographed a casing coming out of a gun. I've only chronographed bullets. So I have no idea how fast a casing comes out. It doesn't come out with enough force to really hurt anybody.
So there weren't any divots in the wall or anything like that because,
There could be microscopic divots, but it'd be very difficult to find.
and you didn't find any that were visible to the eye.
Nothing that's caught my eye, no.
So were you there at the time when Alex did the walkthrough?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you were there. Did he describe where he was standing?
Sustained.
Did he show you physically where he was standing?
Sustained.
Was there a wall right next to where he was standing?
Sustained.
Your Honor, I'm not asking for the truth of the matter asserted. I'm saying he observed this person standing in that place.
Well, you can ask him if he observed Mr. Cox standing in that place.
Okay. Did you observe Mr. Cox standing in the room where he told you that the gun was?
I observed him standing in the vicinity that he indicated.
And was that in the hallway or in the main room?
Right. If the question is in relation to Mr. Cox showing or recreating or demonstrating, then the objection is sustained.
Where did you observe Mr. Cox standing when he went through the walkthrough to?
Well, that's the testimony that I'm saying is a form of hearsay. So please ask a different question.
I'm trying to understand, Your Honor. So what the witness observed is not relevant?
I didn't say that. Let's do a sidebar.
Okay, I would love that. Detective Coons, where would you place the shooter standing in that room?
I would place the shooter in the area of where the curve of the wall was in the kind of the hallway entry area, somewhere in that general area.
So would you have it, what direction would you place him standing? Facing, I mean, not standing, but facing.
For which shot?
The first one.
The first one in a more northeasterly direction,
Mhm. And the second?
in a more northern direction with a slight deviation to the east.
So would you have him stepping forward? Is that what you're saying?
No,
What direction would you have him moving?
I didn't say the shooter moved.
You're just saying that he shot from a different angle?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you think he was standing in the same location?
I don't know that.
So according to where you put him standing with the first shot, the casing bounced off of the wall to the right and landed to the left.
Correct.
And then where you have him standing in the second shot, the same thing happened.
Approximately, yes.
And how far apart were those casings found?
I don't have the specific measurement of how far apart they were. They were a few feet.
So they're a few feet apart.
Yes.
So if he was standing in the same place, would they be a few feet apart or would they be closer?
It depends on a different amount of things, like how was the gun being held? Was it canted to the side? Was it not? What the angle was. Could the shooter have moved? A little, but it would have been the same general vicinity.
But you said he didn't move, according to you.
I said I didn't say he moved.
So he could have moved because they were more than a foot apart, the casings found.
A little, yes. Would have been in the same general area.
So he could have taken a couple steps.
Perhaps. Could have slid the body sideways. Anything that you can do to the body, it could have been done in a short area.
And is that common in, I don't know with shooting, if is that common with someone to shoot once and then move and shoot again?
I'll sustain it on speculation.
In your experience as a firearms expert who fires a lot of guns, right? Would that be a common thing to do?
All right, I'll sustain the objection as to speculation.
Let's talk about stippling. The first shot, according to you, had stippling. Is that correct?
No,
It did not have any stippling.
none was observed.
And the second shot,
None was observed.
no stippling was observed.
Correct.
Is that what's in the ME's report?
I believe so.
That there was no stippling? Can I have a minute, Your Honor? When you were observing the autopsy, the ME didn't say anything about stippling?
I don't recall any mention about stippling.
And you didn't have a discussion with him about it?
We would have if he'd observed any.
And so if he said that to someone else, you would be surprised?
I don't know what he had in his notes. I didn't author his report.
Can you describe stippling for us? What
It-
that is?
Sure. It's basically a combination of particles that come out from behind or follow the projectile as it exits the barrel. A lot of times it's partial burned or unburned powder, and it's a short distance phenomena, so the person has to be extremely close for the pattern to actually present itself and the particles embed in the clothing or the skin.
So if stippling was found, how far away would the gun have to be from the victim
That depends on the gun.
on this 45 semi-automatic?
I am not a expert on the stippling patterns. That is something that we would have to send to the lab for. And what they would do is they would test it with witness panels at different distances to give that information.
Is there an estimate?
That's where it would come in. Usually the medical examiner, if they observe stippling, will give an estimate of close or contact.
So would you be surprised if he said 2 to 4 feet?
If that's what he says.
That if there's stippling, then the gun would have to be 2 to 4 feet.
It's possible, but I wouldn't hold my hat on that, no. I would have to have the gun tested for that.
Okay. And
Is
so,
this a good spot to break for the evening?
sure, Your Honor.
I mean, I'm not cutting you off. If you want to ask a few more questions, that's fine.
Nope, that's fine.
All right, we'll take our evening recess. Members of the jury, please remember the admonition. I'll remind you to specifically avoid any outside information, any information about this case outside this courtroom. And we'll see you tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Thank you.
All rise for the jury.
All right, the jury is no longer present. Please be seated. Exhibits you anticipate that you might need during the rest of your cross-examination prior to us starting, because there are a lot of photographs to try to sift through to get the ones that you may need. You have a habit of when a witness answers a question, to add something on the end of their answer. For example, during this witness, you said, I wasn't aware of that. Another time you said, I don't know much about guns. On previous witnesses, you've said, that's what I recall, or I'm not really sure. When you say those types of things, it's a form of testimony. Okay, so I'm going to caution you to try to refrain from doing that. After the answer, just move on to your next question, okay?
Sure.
All right. Anything else from the state?
Yes, Your Honor. I received information that a couple different detectives have been subpoenaed and asked to appear tomorrow. There was no phone number for them to call in to say they received their subpoena, and they were asking me to advise them that they need to come here, but I am happy to pass that along, or I wasn't sure if they need to come here tomorrow or not, but I've been asked to.
All right, so I'm clear. The defense subpoenaed a few detectives. The information in the subpoena says they need to appear tomorrow.
Correct, along with one civilian who also reached out to us, Joe Pongratz.
Okay, but was there
Detective Moffett and Joe Pongratz are who I'm aware of, who were given a subpoena with no number to call and confirm, just says to come here tomorrow.
It was my understanding that the subpoenas were to say to call to check in beginning on the date tomorrow, because we didn't know where we would be at this point in trial.
Who do you want them to call to see when they actually need to be here? Because obviously the state's not going to finish their case this week, I don't think.
Correct.
I can give the defense their numbers. I don't know how, I just wanted, I mean, obviously if she wants them to come here, and I will tell them that. I just was passing that along as that is obviously.
So it sounds like the subpoena may have been missing some information of who they should check in with to make sure they report on the correct date and time. So who do you want them to call? Those witnesses? Your investigator?
Yes.
And okay, so we don't need to put it on the record, but the state will pass the investigator's number along, name and number along to those witnesses, and they'll call your investigator, but you're saying they don't need to report tomorrow, correct?
Correct. I didn't get to see those subpoenas. They went straight from my paralegal to OPDS, so I'm not quite sure what they said.
Okay, so I'll direct the state to provide that information, contact information, and that those witnesses just need to stay in contact with the investigator.
Perfect.
All right, anything else for before tomorrow
No, you're right, that's it.
from the defense? All right, we'll be at recess. Thank you. You can sit down.
What time do you get back? I can't put her on the back of the motorcycle and drive her there, can I?
You could go with us. We could just all three.
Okay, what are we doing? Yeah, we're keeping it in the room right here.
And then bring it back.
Is there a Mr. Eaton here appearing?
Your Honor, Matthew Kelly, I represent Mr. Eaton.
Okay, you filed a motion over the weekend Mr. Eaton or someone that he works with filed a motion. Mr. Eaton was, let's address that now while we have people here. Mr. Eaton was listed as a witness by the defendant. Mr. Eaton apparently is a reporter in Idaho, and based on the filings, believes he doesn't have any relevant information and shouldn't be listed as a witness. So let me ask the defendant, what relevant information would Mr. Eaton have? Why is he listed as a witness?
Well, I just got this last night, so I haven't had time to read all the things that he's claiming he doesn't. But there's several things off the top of my head that is relevant. Right now, one of the things is it's different now, right? Because he's had this off the record conversation with the prosecutor, and he's kind of made himself a witness. He's kind of made her a witness.
How so?
In the sense that if this is not prosecutorial misconduct, then one of them is going to have to testify and talk about how it's not.
Let's back up. How is he
Okay.
a witness to this trial? How does he have relevant information? Relevant information means a witness has testimony that makes some fact in the case more or less likely. So how does he have relevant information for what this case is about?
Okay, so initially when I put him on my witness list, my intent is because I do not know what the state is going to put on in their case in chief. And so I was calling him as a witness for the purpose of impeachment, laying foundation for interviews, rebuttal to whatever that the state might put forth, because he has interviewed almost every single witness on their witness list. And if they were to say something contrary to what they said to him on a public thing, then I would use him to lay a foundation for interviews and for impeachment. So that was my initial, in calling him. I found it funny when I read the beginning of this, he says that it seems to be clear attempt by Mrs. Daybell to use the rules of criminal procedure as a pretext simply to keep me out of the courtroom and interfere with my ability to report. So I had to laugh at that because it hadn't even occurred to me that he wouldn't be able to be in the courtroom if he was a witness according to 615. So that wasn't my intention. It was never my intention to do that. It was just to have him on hand if we needed to do that.
All right. Mr. Kelly, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Kelly, in theory, it sounds like if a witness said something different than they reported to Mr. Eaton at some point, I guess in theory, she's right that Mr. Kelly could be called as a witness to impeach someone, but that's only allowed after the person's confronted with the actual statement that was made, and if they then deny that statement that was made. Do you have copies of his interviews and transcripts of interviews that you might want to impeach someone with?
I've been watching most of the interviews and I take my own notes, so yes.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, two things. One, excluding Mr. Eaton under Rule 615 would be a violation of his rights under the First Amendment to attend and report on this very public trial. But more importantly, Your Honor, if Mr. Eaton were to be called as a witness, the party calling him would have to comply with ARS 12-2214, which has very stringent requirements for subpoenaing and compelling the testimony of a journalist about information that journalist has obtained in the course of news gathering. As we state in our motion, we don't believe that there is any way that Ms. Daybell can meet those requirements, but I would suggest that if she wants to call him as a witness, she would absolutely have to follow the requirements of the subpoena law, and we would then have an opportunity to challenge that. But we don't believe that there should be any reason for Mr. Eaton to be excluded from the courtroom.
All right. I'm just thinking through this problem. If a witness got on the witness stand and said something different in testimony than you saw on an interview with Mr. Eaton, you would then play that interview. You wouldn't even need Mr. Eaton to do the impeachment because you could impeach them with the interview by playing it for them in court or something like that. So now that I'm kind of thinking it through a little more, I'm not sure.
And I wouldn't need him to lay that foundation for the interview?
I'm really trying not to give you any legal advice because you are acting as your own attorney, but if the witness admits that's them on the interview and that's their statement, that is foundation. So
He's interviewed law enforcement, almost all the law enforcement that's going to be, up here on the stand. So it's not just witnesses, it's law enforcement.
well, when I say witness, I mean generally any witness, regardless of their occupation. So I don't foresee, I see it in only the narrowest of situations where he could even be called to as a extrinsic person to testify about the impeachment. You'd have to jump through a number of hoops before that as far as presenting the witness what the statement is, and depending on whether they admit or deny that it's them on that video or interview or whatever the case may be that you're referring to. But I'm inclined to strike him as a witness at this time, allow him to be present if he so chooses in the trial. But then again, if you wanted him as a witness, you would need to subpoena him. But at this point, I'm going to strike him from the witness list and permit him to be in the courtroom. If there's a situation where you think something has happened during the trial where you think he should be called as a witness, I guess we'll cross that bridge when and if it comes. Okay.
We could just call him up from the back?
Well, we'll address it when and if it comes, yeah.
And Your Honor, I would ask that if that were to occur, that I would be notified and given a chance to appear and be heard.
Well, everyone will get a chance to be heard if we cross that bridge. I just don't see us crossing that bridge, but I could be wrong. So at this time, it's sort of striking Nate Eaton from the witness list. He can be present if he so chooses in the courtroom.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The next one is legal advice to defense witness Nate Eaton. We've somewhat discussed that, but I think their motion, the state says that they simply notified him that he would need to be served with a subpoena to have to appear in court. So how is that improper?
It's taking her word for that that's what happened. She's not under oath saying that that's what happened. Nate Eaton's not here to testify that that's what happened. They're the only two parties that are there to say that that is what happened. So that is my problem with it. I would like for one of them to get on the stand and say exactly what happened in that conversation and that she wasn't giving him legal advice. How do we know that she wasn't? It's a very curious situation that he called her and then he writes in his motion this statement that obviously comes from Ms. K. She seems to be a clear attempt by Ms. Daybell to use the rules of criminal procedure as a pretext simply to keep me out of the courtroom and interfere with my ability to report. We also don't know if he told her, don't come to the March 18th hearing because that's when they're going to serve you with your subpoena. So all these things come from there and we don't know who's saying it. And you're just taking her word for it. Like you took her word for, oh, there's only 6 emails and there's no other emails. You're just taking her word for it as an officer of the court. And I think that she should have to be sworn in.
Well, you want me to just take your word for he must have gotten these things from Ms. K. Okay. Just because his motion says he thinks that you're noticing him as a witness to keep him out of the courtroom. I don't know why you take the jump to that is coming from Ms. K as opposed to his own volition. He also hired an attorney that said the same thing. even if she had said you need to be served with a subpoena to have to show up in court, that is not an ethical violation.
Giving legal advice is an ethical violation. Is that correct?
Stating what the law is not an ethical violation. If she said, I don't think you should show up at court, even if you're subpoenaed or something like that, that could be an ethical violation, but we don't have that.
How do
All
we
right.
know we don't have that? That's my question. How do we know what went on in that conversation if it wasn't recorded? Aren't witnesses?
You can
Interviews
interview him.
recorded?
You can interview Mr. Eaton. You're that information from Mr. Eaton that something nefarious happened in the conversation. Bring it up then. You're jumping to conclusion. You have the right to interview witness, okay?
Not going to interview him and try to find this information because we can't get it now. Is that what you're saying?
Sure. This time, based on just the pleading, I'm denying the motion to dismiss for prosecutorial misconduct.
Let me kind of explain that how the system worked first. Yesterday, week actually, several people in Maricopa County, hundreds, got e-questionnaires that they filled out, J. Tiley. If those questionnaires passed and were made it through, like all the questions were cool, then yesterday and this morning, the judge went through a list. He'd say, okay, juror number 2460 said that they've seen media coverage and they have a mother who has cancer and they need to care. I move that they are stricken for hardship. And the prosecution said, I agree. And Lori said, I agree. And the person was removed. Once we got through that process, whoever was remaining in that pool came in this afternoon. And we had, I believe, I tweeted it out. I don't remember the exact number. I think it was 55 maybe who came in. And the goal was to get to 12 jurors and 4 alternates. And then they all filed in. We were, all the spectators, including the media, were put on the left side of the courtroom behind the defense. The jurors came in and they seated 17 up in the jury box. And then they seated the rest on the rows on the other side of the courtroom. And then the judge went through some very generic questions like, do any of you have a police officer in your family? And do you take the word of a police officer above the word of others simply because he's a police officer? Have any of you had family members convicted of crimes? Have any of you ever been convicted of a crime? These type of questions. And they would raise their numbers and they would be given a mic and they would explain their thoughts on that. And then after that, the prosecution put on headphones, hooked to a microphone, and the defense, Lori Vallow, did as well, and then the judge did as well, and then they played white noise over the courtroom. Now, this is what's called a sidebar. In Idaho, they did this a lot, and the attorneys would gather with the judge. The judge would step down from the bench, and they would gather in the corner. Lori, because she's the defendant charged with this crime, she can't approach the judge. She can't approach the witness. She's got to stay at the podium or stay at her table. And in order to communicate effectively in a sidebar, you can't be yelling because people will hear. So they've installed this system, this headphone microphone system, and that's how they're communicating with each other during the sidebar. It's pretty interesting. And the white noise is very loud. We can't hear a thing. So they put on these headphones for about 5-10 minutes, and then the judge said, okay, the clerk, maybe it was the judge or the clerk, one of them said, the following jurors are excused. They let a bunch go. And then they sent everybody out in the hall. And then all the remaining jurors came back in and they were giving new numbers. They were seated up in the jury box. And that was the focus for this first round, you could say, which ultimately ended up being the only round. And the Judge asked them a few questions, but then Trina Kay got up to ask a few questions of her own. And she said things like, the Church of the Latter-day Saints, Mormons, LDS, it's going to be discussed in this trial. Do any of you have really strong feelings for or against the church? None of the jurors raised their numbers. Do any of you own guns? Several raised their numbers. I believe 10 did. Are any of you considered an expert in guns where you might hear testimony of the way of excuse me, the trajectory of a bullet, when you might think in your mind, there's no way that gun could have done that, and you might doubt the expert? None of them raised their cards. And then she asked a couple of other questions, and that was that. Then Lori Vallow got to question the jurors. Lori walked up to the podium. They adjusted the mic. She said, my name is Lori Vallow. I'm the defendant. I'm 51. And she started to give her biography, a little bit about herself. And the judge stopped her and said, this is questioning. This isn't statement giving. This isn't biography. This isn't, testifying. This is questioning. And so she proceeded to ask questions. She appeared timid, a little insecure. She would start a question and then stop and look down at her notes. Let me just pull up some of the questions she asked, because I don't know how to describe. I really wish there could have been a video, and it'll be interesting if this is the tactic that Lori chooses to take during the trial, or if it's going to be the Lori we saw yesterday where she's fired up. Okay. Lori asks if they understood that it's the state's 100% burden to prove that she's guilty, and they did. She asks if anyone would have a problem if at the end of the state's case and they didn't prove that she committed a crime at all, they would think, I can't find you innocent until you told me what happened. She hinted at the fact that she might not give a defense. That if at the end of the state's case, if she feels like she does not have to give a defense or testify, if the jury would have a problem with that. None of them raised their numbers. So it got me thinking. I mean, she didn't do a defense in Idaho. Do you remember that? It was weeks and weeks and weeks of the prosecution, and then it was time for the defense, and her attorney said, Your Honor, we feel the state did not meet their burden of proof. We rest. Will Lori do that here? Will the actions of the past few months with these motions and the experts and the witness and calling me and all that, will that be her just saying, well, never mind. They didn't prove their case. I could see it happening. Or I could see Lori trying to put on a defense. I don't know who she's going to call. I don't know what witness they're going to have. But she did ask that question. She said it's human nature to want to hear both sides. Then she asked and said that a bunch of different family dynamics will be introduced at this trial, and asked if anybody would have a problem, and then she stopped. Would anybody have difficulty understanding different family dynamics? And she asked if anyone in jury had stepbrothers, stepchildren, I think is how it was phrased. And several raised their numbers. And then she called on one to answer, but she couldn't really say the question. And the judge had to jump in and basically say, will your family dynamic of having stepchildren or whatever influence you in how you rule in this case, how you decide? And he explained, no, it doesn't, it won't. And then I thought Lori might jump to the others, but she didn't. She just called on the one and moved along with her questions. She asked, she said, if someone believes, this was, I thought, a good question. She goes, if you believe that I'm innocent and you're the only one in the group, will you have enough courage to stand against all the other group? Because that can be hard. I thought that was a good question. She said, that's hard. Nobody raised their hand saying that. She then proceeded to tell the jurors what part of their job was, and Trina K objected, the prosecutor. The judge stepped in and said, your job is to determine if the state proves its case, jurors. That's your job. I've already told you your job. I should have said this was after the judge went through lengthy instructions about, you have to, anything that you've heard outside the courtroom, you can't bring in. You have to follow the rules of the courtroom, regardless of what you think the rules are or what you might have heard or what people have told you. You have to stick what's in the courtroom. So the judge kind of jumped in. Lori repeatedly took off her glasses, would refer to her notebook, would put them on. I guess vice versa. She'd put them on to read and then take them off to talk to the jurors. She asked if people understood what conspiracy is. And if you did not see or hear a specific agreement, if because there wasn't like a written agreement,